Yeah, so it otherworldly is definitely a great way of describing it. There are not very many places around the world that you can go where you are seeing the world actually being formed. Like this is how it all began, and there's something that really strikes you and is very deeply powerful when you're in one of these places where the Earth is actively being formed, and that's what's going on here.
Hello, Lauren Eber, and welcome back to the RV Atlas. It's been almost exactly a year since you were on the show. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be back.
And when you were here a year ago, you did this epic trilogy of podcasts that is still one of the best things we have ever done on the RV Atlas. You did an episode on Joshua Tree, an episode on Death Valley, and an episode on Valley of Fire. And we got a lot of really nice feedback on it. We called it the Spring Desert Camping Trilogy, I believe. So thank you so much for that. I can't believe that was a year ago.
I'm so glad that people enjoyed it. I hope a lot of people have been hitting the desert.
Yeah, and I just like time flies, and now you're back for Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. We have never covered Hawaii on this podcast for obvious reasons, but it is very possible to take an epic van life trip. Okay, I don't know, probably not too many RVs out there, but you can take an epic van life trip, and you guys did. And you're gonna break this down for us, and even just your photos made me so happy, and those will be on the rvatlas.com in the show notes because you guys looked so happy on this trip. Like you just looked filled with joy when you did this trip.
Uh, We were also very young.
That's
But
why you were
yes,
happy.
I mean, yeah. It was, it was a great trip, and this episode is so fun for me because, um, this really is sort of if you're kind of tracing the roots to the beginning of our van life journey, this is where it all began. This was the first trip that we took in a van. We had a baby, just one at the time, and we thought it would be fun to rent a VW camper van and camp our way around the big island of Hawaii and check out this epic national park. And that's sort of where we got the bug. And it took us a few years to get our own camper van after that, but that was really what planted the seed.
It's amazing how one trip can change your life. Not every trip does,
Yep.
but when you put yourself out there and travel, some of the trips just impact the entire direction of your life. And when I saw that in your notes where you said that this is sort of where like the van life thing started for you guys, I was like, "Oh, this is like the origin story
Yep.
for Lauren." So we're gonna
Yep.
do a bunch of different things here. Let's give everybody a preview and they can get comfortable and settle in. We're gonna talk about flying in, just like basic details that you need to know, some of the technicalities of renting a camper van and some of the options. Then you're going to give us a robust 1 to 2 week sample itinerary that takes us all around the big island of Hawaii, which is what we're talking about here. Then you're going to
Hmm.
zoom in to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, which I'm super excited about because it just ties into our theme this year where we're celebrating national parks because of our new book. But then you have even more at the end because there's some other NPS sites, and you always bring the recommendations for food and drink. So let's dive in and just, we got a lot of RV owners listening here. People, you're gonna have to get on a plane, okay? Um, so
Yes,
so what,
you
Lauren? What?
do. You have to get on a plane or yeah, or a very long boat ride if you want to get to Hawaii.
So give us
Yeah.
the basics. What do we need to know about flying in? What are our options?
Yeah. So you're going to the Big Island. That's where Hawaii Volcanoes National Park is. There are two main airports, both of which have direct flights from the mainland, or connecting flights from other Hawaiian islands. They are in Hilo and in Kona. And it really doesn't matter tremendously where you start. You can either go from there and sort of just hit the national park, or you can do the kind of island circuit that I've recommended, starting from either location. We
Which one
started in
is
Hilo. And,
okay? And that's the one closest to the
yeah.
park.
Yeah. It's not so long either way, but yes, it's not
Okay.
very long to get from Hilo up to the park. So, and Hilo is sort of a bigger city. Kona is more on the more touristy side of the island. Um, but Hilo is sort of a bigger city. And for us coming from LA at the time, we were able to get a direct flight from Los Angeles into Hilo.
So you can use one airport in and out, or you could, land at one and then fly out of another. You have some options there for flying into the Big Island.
Yes, yes. So you can either do a circuit and fly in and out of the same, or right, exactly. Kind of do your trip in one and out of the other. Even if you wanted to do some island hopping, you could do it that way as well.
Any other tips for the flight part of it, which is strange turf for some of the RV owners out there that don't fly a lot, or do you want to just dive in and talk about the camper van rental options?
Yeah, no, what I would say is that flying for a camping trip can involve a lot of pre planning and sometimes more luggage than you would typically bring. So, the thing that's really important to do is pre plan, figure out from whoever you're renting your van or RV from, or truck camper or whatever it is, or car, um, exactly what gear you're going to be able to rent there and what you have to bring with you. And I would say the more that you can rent, the easier it'll be. So if you can, are you going to do a mix of van camping and tent camping and you need a tent and sleeping bags and pads? Is that something they can include with your package or that you can rent elsewhere while you're there? Or do you need to try to bring some of that stuff with you? At a minimum, you're going to want to make sure they're providing the stove or anything like that that would be difficult for you to pack. So just make sure that you're really clear well in advance about what's included and what's not so you can pack accordingly.
And no one's suggesting this is not like a logistically challenging trip, but tent gear is rentable, obviously. So you're not flying with
Yeah.
sleeping
Yeah.
bags and sleeping pads and all of that crazy stuff. And of course, a lot of you listening, you could just fly in, rent a car, and stay in hotels. All right, perfectly acceptable too. But you guys did the van
Totally.
life route. Yeah. Okay. So what
We
are our
did. And
options?
we did some tent camping too, so but that was all included in the van. They had the tent and the sleeping bag and pads. We did have to bring some extra baby gear with us, but it was no big deal.
I know this is later in your notes, but since you mentioned the tent aspect, um, well, there's a specific reason why you were having to have a tent with you, right? As opposed to just staying in the van.
Yeah, yeah. So some of the county or state park campgrounds in Hawaii don't actually allow you to sleep in your vehicle. So you're definitely going to want to research and make sure you know what the rules are for each place that you're camping. And even if you're not usually a tenter, I have to say, like, if you're ever going to push yourself out of your comfort zone and stay in the tent, this is the place. I mean, some of these oceanside campgrounds that you stay in with a tent, I mean, it is the most spectacular views you've ever seen in your life, and you're sitting there in your tent right on the water with these views that would cost thousands of dollars in some of the incredibly high-end hotels that are, just a mile down the road from where you're camping for $25 a night. So, it's
So
this this is the place if you're ever gonna do it. Yeah.
you were sleeping in the van in some places, and in other places you were required to use a tent, and that just required some advanced research on your part in terms of knowing. And it just sounds like it would be nifty to have a tent with you if you're doing a van trip in Hawaii, right? In case you end up in a situation
I
where it's like,
think
oh, you
so.
can't sleep. Yeah. Okay, great. So where are we going to
I mean,
rent our? Go ahead.
yeah, no, that's what you're there for, right? You're in Hawaii to experience Hawaii, and you want to be. The weather's beautiful, and it's warm, and it's sort of idyllic conditions for tent camping. So, um, you know, I say go for it.
Sounds good to me. I mean, we have 2 tent camping trips planned this year. I'm super, super excited about it. So, but where do we rent our vans from in Hawaii? And guys, remember, we're not talking about renting big motorhomes, really. I don't know that that exists there as an option. We're talking about renting vans. So, what are our options for renting
Yeah.
vans?
So, there are some smaller RVs that you can find on Outdoorsy, but it's true that for the most part, you're going to have much better selection in vans. There are a lot of truck campers with rooftop tents, that sort of thing, and some smaller motorhomes. But so I I would actually suggest looking at Outdoorsy, the peer-to-peer RV rental site, because you're going to have the widest variety there. Um, in terms of companies that actually rent um, vans and campers, there is not a whole lot, but the two that seem to be the main ones are Campervan Hawaii. Their website is campervanhawaii.com, um, and Huakai Campers, Huakai campers.com. Camper Van Hawaii um, rents, vans. But they're not particularly large, but they are camper vans. And Huakai Campers does truck campers with rooftop tents that look very cool. We rented from a really great small family business called Happy Campers Hawaii that rented out old VW vans, but sadly, it's no longer in business from what I can tell. But we had this really funky 1990s era Westphalia called Akanai, and it just had so much character. It broke down once in the middle of the trip. The van rental company came out and fixed it for us. So, this is not like a seamless journey, but it was great. It's so much fun, and all of those little misadventures are part of what make the trip memorable.
Okay, so 2 really big options there, the peer-to-peer route with Outdoorsy, RV Share, or a couple companies that rent the vans. It'll probably be smaller vans. Maybe if you wanna try and get something a bit bigger, you look at Outdoorsy. But the point is there are options, right, to do this.
Right.
So, now
Yep.
you've got this incredible 1 to 2 week itinerary, which I think would take me a month. Let's dive in. Like, tell us the highlights of this trip and how you did it and what you recommend along the way.
Yeah. So we zipped through it in about a week, but man, would I have loved to have had another week and be able to linger longer at each of these places. But you can make it work with whatever time you have. I mean, I think we did it over like a Thanksgiving break and managed to make it work, and it was fabulous. So whatever time you have, I think you can make the trip work in that amount of time.
I also think Hawaii is one of
So
those I think Hawaii is one of those places, I've heard this from so many people, and you tell me if this happened with you guys. I've heard from so many people, they think that Hawaii is gonna be this bucket list once in a lifetime trip, and then they go and they say, "I have to go back." And it becomes
yeah.
a trip that you do multiple times over the course of a lifetime. There's more than one island, for goodness sake, for one reason.
Yes, definitely. There's no way you can go to Hawaii and not want to go back and see more of it.
Okay, so where do we go first?
Okay. So for us, we flew into Hilo and we rented a camper. We were fortunate. The people we rented from met us at the airport with our van, gave us the walkthrough. And then we went to, I think actually like the Walmart in Hilo and or some big box store to sort of stock up on food or any other last minute supplies that we needed. And then from there, kind of got right out of town. There are some grittier elements of Hilo in certain parts as well. So um, it's not the town that you want to kind of linger in necessarily. So we just sort of did our business in Hilo and then um, drove about 45 minutes north to Lapahoho Beach Park. And that was our first stop. It's a beautiful park. So this side of the island, the Hilo side of the island, is the dry side. So every island in Hawaii has a dry side and a wet side. And so Hilo is on the dry side, Kona is on the wet side. Sorry, I said that backwards. Hilo's on the wet side, Kona's on the dry side. So on the Hilo side, it's lush, green, rain, waterfalls, creeks, all of that. Kona, which is where that's the stretch where most of the resorts are, it's dry. So that's where you're going to get your more reliable dry weather. And this whole sort of resort industry has grown up over there. So on the Hilo side, that's the wet side of the island. It's beautiful tropical forest landscape, and we stayed in this park right on the water with a rocky coastline, and the campsite is right there, and you have the waves breaking against the rocks a few feet from where you're camping all night long. And in that one, I think we did stay in the van.
In a general sense, did you reserve all of these places before showing up, or was it first come, first served anywhere, or did you have reservations for these all of these campgrounds?
For the most part, I did reserve in advance through the Hawaii websites, state or county, depending, or national park, depending on the location.
Right, so
Yeah.
some waterfalls nearby and this part of the journey?
Yes. So definitely while you're over on this side of the island, you're going to want to check out some of the incredible waterfalls and tropical forest sites. So the number one that I think is a must see, and it really doesn't take very long to go visit it, is Akaka Falls. Um, so it's a Hawaiian state park, and there's just an easy, flat, paved walk that you do to get to this incredible, very, very tall waterfall. It's beautiful. I highly recommend it. And if you have the time, I would also add in Rainbow Falls, which is similarly accessible. Both of those are going to be great. You can do them all in the same day before heading inland on Highway 11 and making your way toward Hawaii Volcanoes National Park.
Well, that's a pretty spectacular start to the trip, right? Camping,
Yes.
in that state park and then heading to the waterfalls. Now, just give us, like, the basics
Yes.
on Hawaii volcanoes, and then in a later segment, you're gonna go into more detail about the park. So where did you stay there?
Yeah. So in Hawaii Volcanoes, the accommodations are managed through a concessionaire called Hawaii Volcano House. And Hawaii Volcano House has three basic options. They do have a sort of a hotel style lodgings, or it's maybe more like a B&B kind of style lodge. So if you are going the route of just renting a regular car and staying in hotels and cabins and lodges, which I think is totally doable option, then you could stay in the sort of hotel area there. They also have rustic cabins, so you could rent one of the rustic cabins um, and use sleeping bags and so on. Or we stayed at a campsite. They have some regular campsites. The campground is called Namakani Payo Campground. There is one other campground in the park, but that's the one that I would recommend. Campsites are only $15, and or you can bump up to $40 and rent a tent that they will set up for you.
And those were
So
pretty
it's very
small
central.
campgrounds.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
they're small. So yeah. It's not a ton of sites. So you definitely are going to want to check in advance and make sure that you can get a reservation.
Okay, cool. So, anything else you wanna say about Hawaii volcanoes now, or do you wanna keep moving on the road trip? Because I know we're gonna circle back to Hawaii volcanoes and really give everybody a, whole segment on it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's it. I think staying in the park there though makes a lot of sense. There's not a whole lot of other places right nearby to stay, and that positions you right in the center of you're going to want to do sort of the ring road that loops its way around the park as the main activity. So if you stay there, you're right there. You're close to the visitor center. Um, Very
And
convenient.
and how many if somebody's, just like you guys, was doing a week's vacation, like, how many days do you need at Hawaii volcanoes, considering there's so many other awesome things on the island?
Yeah, I would say 1 to 2. You definitely want to have at least a full day to do the main ring road, and with 2 days you can also do. There's an out and back road that takes you to see some other parts of the park. So minimum 1 day to explore. Two is better if you can spare the time.
Okay, great. Where are we going next on our van life, road trip on the Big Island of Hawaii?
All right. Yeah. So after we have, you cut through the middle of the island to get to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, and then you sort of continue in that same direction and get yourself back to the coast. And so when you hit the coast, you're going to be in an area because the lava has this is sort of, you're following the trail of the lava that's coming from the volcano. And, Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, you're on the volcano up at the top, right? But the whole island is a volcanic island, right? It's everywhere you go, you're seeing signs of volcanic activity. The whole landscape is shaped by the volcanoes. So the whole island exploration is part of this experience of seeing, these active volcanoes on the Big Island. So um, the next spot, as you sort of make your way down back towards the coast, is a beautiful black sand beach that also is known for having sea turtles. Two species, one of which is endangered. Those are harder to find, but the green sea turtles are common to see. And that is called Punalu'u Beach Park. And it's a beach and a campground, and that's a great place to stay for the night, see some sea turtles, check out the gorgeous black sand beach. Really good place to snorkel.
And these are state
So
and these are I
that's the
mean, we
next
just talked
stop.
about the national park, but this one is a state park campground, and so was, I think, the
Yes.
first one, right? So you did a lot of state
Yes.
park campgrounds because 'cause they're gonna be in prime
Yes.
locations. Is there a culture
Yeah.
of private campgrounds there, or is it just mostly kinda state park and national park camping?
There are some private campgrounds as well. Not a ton. The state park campgrounds, there's like a pretty robust network of state park campgrounds, and they're inexpensive. But there are some private campgrounds. There's also, Hip Camp, some of those sort of individual, private, like peer to peer campground options. If you want to try to see if you can find something a little more off the beaten path or unusual, um,
Oh, that's such a
or
great
maybe in
recommendation
a
that
less,
probably wasn't
yeah,
available to you guys at the time, I would imagine.
correct, yeah,
Yeah, oh
it
my
wasn't
gosh, that's yeah, if you could be staying on somebody's private property in some beautiful location, that's a great option too. So, we going to
exactly.
Kona? Is Kona our next stop?
Yeah, that's our next stop. So you're continuing west on Highway 11, making your way sort of around the southern end of the island, and then coming back up along the west side. So now we're getting towards Kona, which, as I said, is the drier side of the island. And Kona is really where that's like the heart of the tourist corridor. So tons of tourist amenities, tons of hotels, um, lots of restaurants, lots of activity, lots of cool things to see. Also, more people. So, in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, it never really felt crowded to us. Um, and same, on the Hilo side, and then again, if you're sort of at Punalu'u Beach, it's a little quieter. But then, as you sort of make your way towards Kona, you're gonna have more people around.
I is it sort of in
So
a good way or a bad way? Like, I know that, the way you guys do your van life, you kinda like to escape the crowds, I think, to some degree, I think that's fair to say. So is this,
yeah,
a place that's, like, a can't miss location, or if you want a quieter Hawaiian vacation, might you skip it?
so I would not skip Kona. I think you have to go to Kona and you have to see it. You should know what you're in for. And you can also make choices about your accommodations based on what you like. So if you stay at one of the campgrounds near Kona, I would say just prepare yourself that you're going to have sort of a Hawaiian experience where there are going to be a lot of people. The state and county parks in this area, people sort of families kind of crowd the beach, and tents are like right next to each other, and there's loud music playing, and people are barbecuing Hawaiian food and dancing, and it can be like a scene, um, which can be a really really cool cultural experience, or it could be sort of overwhelming for some people. I think if you know and are prepared that that's what you're in for and are open to that, then it can be really wonderful. As it
Well
happens, when we oh,
no, no, go
sorry,
ahead.
did you have a question?
No, go ahead, go ahead.
When we got there, our son, who was a little over a year at the time, um, was teething really badly and spiked a fever and was just like crying and miserable. And we got to this park, and it was like tents all stacked up next to each other in this total party scene. And we had this miserable crying baby with a fever. And I was like, I don't know if we can do this. So we actually wound up going into Kona and getting a hotel room for the night so that I could like put the baby in the bath and bring the temperature down. And we wound up having to go to like a clinic and see the doctor. But you know, So, but and everything was fine, you know, it was like no big deal. But so for us, we decided in that moment, um, you know, okay, it's too much of a scene for what's happening for us right now, which is like crying baby with a fever. But had that not been the situation, I think it would have been a ton of fun. And I would have loved to just hang out and talk to the Hawaiian locals and hear about their lives and listen to their music and, you know, eat some of their food. And I think it's a pretty cool scene. So you just kind of have to know what do you need in the moment. Yeah.
It sounds awesome to me, and I think that as travelers, we do always need to remember that these places don't belong to us; they belong to the people that live there, and it's not your state park. And if the culture there is to make it a big family party, then that's what it is. I would love
Right.
to do it personally. I mean, so many American state park campers,
Yeah.
I think, freak out if they show it at a state park that's loud. You know, it's like they just want their little
Right.
quiet
Right.
slice. But it sounds like there's a mix though, here in Hawaii, that there are state parks that are, quiet and peaceful, and just Kona's its own game basically.
Yes, absolutely. So you're gonna find your solitude in places. This the campground that I'm thinking of in particular that was like this sort of really fun, awesome party scene was Hukena Beach Park in southern Kona. If that just sounds horrible to you, I mean, I say go for it. I thought it was really cool. I'm glad we got to see it. We didn't actually get to stay because of the circumstances, but I thought it was a really cool scene and cool cultural experience. But if that sounds like too much for you, then either consider staying in a hotel or Airbnb or B&B while you're in or near Kona, or look for a quieter sort of hip camp type option, or um, there are some other things that you can check out
And
if that
and
doesn't sound good to you. There's another one called Kohanaiki Beach Park. That's a big surfing spot. So it's still not going to be deserted, but I think not quite as much of a scene as Hukena Beach Park. And you can sort of watch the surfers doing their thing. So that's an alternative to look at as well.
and then Kona, you're suggesting here in your notes that Kona can become your base camp to shoot out and do some day trips and do all kinds of other things in that area.
Definitely, and I think that it's worth spending a couple days in and around Kona, to check out all that this side of the island has to offer. And really, I mean, many people spend an entire 1 to 2 week Hawaiian vacation in Kona, so there's really no end to the activities that you can do. You're gonna have to prioritize what, sounds like the most fun to you, but I mean, gorgeous beaches, kayaking. One of the big experiences a lot of people love to do is a night snorkel with manta rays. Um, there are two national park sites. They're national park historic or national historical parks. One is Pu'u Honua o Honauhau National Historic Parks. Apologies if I didn't pronounce that correctly. And Kaloko Honokohau National Historical Park. And those are both, they're on the beach and they have really cool Hawaiian cultural sites and some sacred sites, and show some rock walls that have been built by the Hawaiian people as part of the sort of sacred use of the space. Really neat to go see. And then there's also um, outside of the town itself, there's a big agricultural area, tons of coffee plantations. And I highly recommend, if you like coffee at all, going on a tour or doing some coffee tastings. I talk more about that later. But the one of the most memorable things that we actually did in Kona was visiting the farmers market. I mean, you've never seen produce like this before. The farmers market there, it's incredible. It's pineapples and mangoes and kiwis and coconuts and just unbelievable. So I would definitely try to get yourself to a farmer's market. You can golf, horseback ride, go to a luau, take a surfing lesson, um, visit the Kekua Bay Marine Preserve to snorkel and kayak. And of course, no end to restaurants, coffee shops, breweries, that sort of thing as well.
I see the point of some people just saying, "Well, this will be my week's vacation." If you
Yeah.
don't wanna do sort of the road trip loop, you certainly could do it that way as well. Oh, we could linger here, but
Yeah,
let's
you could,
let's
and you could definitely just fly into Kona, stay in a hotel, rent a car, go up to Volcanoes National Park for a couple days, stay in the hotel there, come back to Kona. That would be a really easy way of visiting, and you'd still have a great trip.
What's overwhelming me here is this is just one island. Like, it seems like
Yeah.
this could be many trips, but I wanna go to Oahu, you know? There's so much. There is so much. I mean,
Yeah,
my aunt and
yeah.
uncle have spent their lives going to Hawaii, and I know many people that have. So, where to next after Kona on your epic van life road trip and your origin story?
Yeah, so, um from Kona, you're gonna continue up the coast, and again, you're still on that sort of dry coast, and this is still the tourist corridor, um, and there are still lots of resorts all along the coast, up this area, but we're getting farther north, and, the place that I recommend staying here, if you are going the camping route, is the incredibly beautiful Spencer Beach Park. This is one of the most memorable places we've ever camped. It's like camping at the edge of the world. You're up on this point. It's like the westernmost point of Hawaii. Um, the only downside is that when we were there, there was sort of like a high wind warning, and so you're literally like the winds are coming off of the Pacific, and this is like the tip. This is the first part of land that the winds hit,
And when you were you in
for
a tent
like
there?
you know and
Did
we
you
were
have to
in a
do a
tent,
tent
and
there?
so we were
Oh, okay.
camping. We were in a tent, um, like, with probably the most gorgeous view I've ever had out a tent window in my entire life, but it was definitely like one of those nights where you're sort of waking up all night as the wind is sort of battering the tent. But it was an experience, and, one of the most special and memorable camping nights we've ever had, and just so stunningly beautiful. I really can't overemphasize it, and it's this gorgeous white sand beach, really shallow, with a very gradual decline. So it's a great place to go swimming with kids, and it was a great place for us. Even with a 1 year old, the baby could play in the water, and it's so calm and shallow, and just absolutely gorgeous. So if
I
you
love that
have the opportunity to camp at Spencer Beach Park.
your origin story had some challenges here, right? Sick child and winds blowing the tent around at night. Um, it all sounds awesome to me. So that was, like, your favorite
Isn't that what it's all
campground.
about? I mean, aren't the yeah, yes, I think so. I mean, it's the most special experience. And yeah, the foibles, I mean, I don't know, that's if you want a completely predictable vacation, then camping's probably not for you, is my view. But if you want adventures and getting to get closer to things and see stuff that other people aren't gonna have the opportunity to see, then, there's no better way of doing it.
That's such a great line, and I think that, whether you're a tent camper or an RV owner, you have to have a sense of humor. You have to be ready for the
Yeah.
unexpected. You have to be willing to adjust on the fly, and I think those types of qualities build good character traits in adults and children. So, though even in the moment you're like, "Oh my god, I can't fall asleep because the wind's about to blow my tent away." So I don't really want to leave this Spencer Beach Park yet, but let's move on.
No.
Where is our next stop?
You don't. You don't wanna leave, but just before we do leave, a couple things that I wanna point out because Spencer Beach Park is a great location for visiting, Waimea, which is inland. It's also, if you didn't already do the plantation tour, coffee plantation tour thing when you were in Kona, you can do that from here. There are also some sort of famous ranches, Parker Ranch and Anna Ranch in Hawaii. If that's your thing, you can check those out from here. And there's, a very cool petroglyph site, Waikoloa Petroglyph Reserve, that's also very close. So this is a good spot for doing that sort of piece of your itinerary.
And
So, but before you leave Spencer Beach Park, check out some of those things.
if you want a
Yeah.
trip that doesn't include Kona, and I'm not trying to be negative about Kona at all, because I would wanna go there. Is this sort of corner of the island, is it much quieter and less populated, or not necessarily?
Yeah, it's a lot quieter and mellower, so if the Kona scene sounds like too much for you, you definitely could just skip it, use this as your home base, and use it as a way to go see, some of these other sites, and it's really not even that far, like, if you wanted to go see some of the things that I suggested in Kona, including some of those national historical parks, they're within striking distance. It's still wouldn't be too far to go see that stuff.
All right, let's go back in the van and start to really go all the way up to the top of the island here from this map.
Yeah. So from here, we made our way back toward Hilo for the return trip home. And the way that you do it is you're sort of now you're up on the northern side of the island, and you do go kind of through inland through part of it. And this is where it's like the lush green, like Jurassic Park looking kind of landscape that maybe you think of when you're thinking of Hawaii, tropical Hawaii. Um, so you're going to drive through the little town of Waimea on Highway 19. And if you haven't already stopped in Waimea, it's a great little stop for some good food and some cultural experiences. Um, you can stop at Kalopa State Recreation Area, and there's a 0.7 mile little nature walk through the forest that's lovely. And then there's a very famous overlook called the Waipio Valley Overlook. It used to be the case that you could get all the way down into the Waipio Valley, but the road is closed now to anyone who's not a resident. Um, but you can still take the road out that direction and then stop at the overlook, which you have this view of this massive valley with this incredibly tall waterfall, and it's just stunningly beautiful. So if you have the time, that's something that's worth doing. It's a beautiful drive. Um, and then you're going to head back and make your way along the lush and beautiful Hamakua coast, it's called. So you're heading towards the wet side of the island again. And as you're making your way back to Hilo, I recommend detouring off of the main highway to take this short 4 mile stretch of the old Mamalahoa Highway, sometimes called Pepe Ekeo or Onomea Scenic Drive. It's a gorgeous scenic drive through tropical forest that passes by streams and waterfalls, and without taking a whole lot of time, gives you a really beautiful look at this lush, wet side of the island.
I have spent my whole life
And
dreaming of going to Oahu as somebody who grew up surfing and surfs now with my kids. And
yes.
man, you are really making me think long and hard about a trip to the big I gotta be honest, I have not thought too much about the Big Island. I did not know much about the Big Island. It sounds magical to me. It really
It
does.
it
So
really is. It really is. And I've spent, I've been several times to Oahu, several times to Maui, and each of those islands, they definitely have their charms, and I would recommend going to all of them. I likewise had not really thought much about the Big Island and was blown away when I went by how gorgeous it is and how much there is to see and do. And one thing that to remember is, the Hawaiian Islands, the way that they're formed is that the continent is moving over a hot spot that's under the Earth's mantle, under the ocean. And so at the continent moves, I think about like 4 inches a year or something like that. And so each of the Hawaiian Islands was formed by being right on top of the hotspot. And then over time, it sort of moves off and a new island forms. And so the one that's on top of the hotspot right now, which is why it has all of the active volcanic activity, is the Big Island. So those other islands are incredible, but they're not sitting on top of the hotspot anymore. They did their thing, they moved on. The Big Island is still there, sitting on top of the hotspot, erupting. And so there's just so much variety and variation in the landscape. The volcanic activity is incredible, which of course we're going to talk about with the park itself. But this is the island that's still in progress, a work in progress, and so it's super interesting to see.
Oh my god, Mother Nature's amazing. That was quite a lesson there. You really
Yes.
pulled that off, like, really, really well. So let's wrap up the
Thanks.
itinerary part. There's a few more, I think, a few
Okay.
more things you
Yeah.
wanted to definitely mention before we take a break and really dive into Hawaii Volcanoes National Park.
Yeah. So, you've now completed your loop. Okay. You're back to Hilo. And just in terms of the logistics, it's likely, unless you have a late evening flight, you're probably going to need one more night staying somewhere before making your way out of town. You might have to return your car and your camping gear and take care of all of that stuff. So, I think your options are you could return to where you started and stay another night at Laupahoho, which is what we did. Or if you want to be closer to the airport, right in Hilo, there is a private campground. To your previous question, Jeremy, called Arnott's Lodge, which is not going to be like the most special place that you stay, but it's going to get the job done. Of you need a convenient spot to just sort of be your last night before heading back, or you could return all of your camping gear and get a hotel room in Hilo before having to catch your flight out.
Also, I'm just thinking too, like, you can do multiple islands in one trip, right? I mean, if you're going all the way out
Oh, yeah.
there, certainly this could just be the end of the first part of your Hawaii trip, depending on your time and your budget. So, anything
I think
else?
that's right. I mean,
Yeah,
if I had 2 weeks, I might do, like, 8 days on the Big Island and then pick whether you wanna go to Oahu or Maui and take a flight between islands and or Kauai or wherever else you wanna go and spend, 5 nights on one of those islands.
I'd be tempted too to do the van trip to the Big Island or rent a small motorhome if I could find something like that, and then go to a resort on another island, after roughing it a
Yeah,
little bit. Those types of combo trips are really, really cool to me. Okay, are we ready to
absolutely.
and anything else here in this segment? I don't wanna cut you short.
Nope, nope. We've
Alright.
we've done our loop. We've covered the itinerary.
We have completed our loop, but now we're really going to dive into Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. We will be back in a second with Lauren Eber from A Fam with a Van. But before we come back, we have a sponsored message from our friends at Yogi Bear's Jellystone Park Camp Resorts. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are here on the big island of Hawaii with Lauren Eber from Fam with a Van, getting her origin story really as a van lifer on this epic trip that she took to the big island. And she gave us the whole loop, a suggested itinerary for 1 to 2 weeks. But she wanted to come back and focus on Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, which is so perfect for this season of the RV Atlas podcast because we're celebrating national parks. So, welcome back to the show, Lauren. You suggested a day, 2 days at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. I think this is another worldly national park to most of us that most people just don't know a lot about. So, give us the overview. What should we know? What is this place like?
Yeah, so it otherworldly is definitely a great way of describing it. There are not very many places around the world that you can go where you are seeing the world actually being formed. Like this is how it all began, and there's something that really strikes you and is very deeply powerful when you're in one of these places where the Earth is actively being formed, and that's what's going on here. As I said before, we're sitting on top of a hot spot. There is, magma coming up from the earth, and um, you don't know what you're going to get until you're there. So, the first thing that I have to say about visiting the park is that it's really important to check in both before you leave and show up, and then also when you get there about what is the state of the volcanic activity at the time, because it could be anything from nothing happening, and there's still plenty of cool stuff to see, to you actually can't come because there's too much happening. So it's critical to just sort of be aware. And I've included in the show notes some websites that you can go to just to check on what the status is of volcanic activity. Um, just this past year, both at Kilauea and at Mauna Loa, there has been some sort of out of the ordinary levels of volcanic activity. So you want to definitely make sure that you know what's going on when
Such
you
a
go.
great tip, and just to pause there for a second, like, I think that you would need to go and be open-minded and flexible, if you can't go to this section or if this part's closed down, and just know, look, you're on the big island of Hawaii, there's gonna be other amazing things to do, but, maybe don't go with your heart set on one particular experience there at this national park.
Yeah,
Alright, so tell
yeah,
us
that's
more.
absolutely right because it could be the case that there's a big eruption and you have to be flexible and rearrange your itinerary a little bit. So, yeah, so there are four active volcanoes on Hawaii's Big Island. Kilauea is the one that is inside Volcanoes National Park. It's the most active volcano in Hawaii and possibly even anywhere on Earth, depending on how you measure. Um, and where, when, and how it erupts can be very unpredictable. So it's important to always check for updates. According to Hawaiian legend, Kilauea is home to Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of fire and volcanoes. So there's a lot of really interesting cultural information about the. This is a sacred site for the Hawaiian people, and I would encourage you to learn about that and make sure that sort of honoring that is part of your experience while you're there.
Okay, so
The
there's
other
there's more
volcanoes,
volcanoes, yeah, take us to the next one.
yeah, and I'm mentioning them just because it can be actually sort of confusing and you want to sort of know where you are and what's what. But Mauna Loa is the largest volcano in the world, actually, standing at 13,677 feet above sea level and more than 30,000 feet from its base under the ocean to its peak. It has erupted 33 times since 1843. And most recently, there was a lot of news about it. It erupted quite dramatically in November, December of 2022. And so while you're in Volcanoes National Park, where you're at Kilauea volcano, you have a lot of views of Mauna Loa. You can see Mauna Loa sort of looming above the Kilauea caldera.
And does this
Also on the
park
island
take
is
up a
Mauna Kea. Oh,
I'm sorry, does this park take up a massive
yeah.
chunk of the island, of the interior of the island? I mean, I know that you said sort of the whole island is really geographically tied to it. It just sounds like a really big park.
Yeah, the park itself is not that enormous sort of by national park standards. Like I'm thinking of like a Yellowstone or something like that where, it's hours and hours to get around or glacier or something like that. The park itself is not that big, but the interior of the island is dominated by these three volcanoes. Um, but the park itself, I mean, it's a good chunk of land, but it's not that big by kind of national park standards in general, I would say.
I gotcha, sorry there.
Um,
Take us to our
yeah,
next
no,
volcano.
no problem. Yeah, so Mauna Kea is sometimes considered dormant. It hasn't erupted in 3,500 years. Um, it's a, a spot that oftentimes people like to visit, but you can only go with an official tour. You can't drive there yourself. You need special four-wheel drive access for the most part. And the main thing to see there is an observatory up at the top of the mountain that is considered the best place on the island for stargazing, but it's not always accessible. So that's another thing that if you're interested in that, you got to research it. But Mauna Kea also is sort of one of these big volcanoes that sort of looms large over the island and you can see. But when you're in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, again, you can see those other volcanoes, but where you are is at Kilauea. There's
Gotcha.
one more active volcano, Hualalai, which is more sort of up on the northwest of the island. Um, so yeah, that's sort of an overview of the main active volcanoes on the island. And Kilauea, so we're back in the national park. Kilauea had some very dramatic eruption activity earlier this year. Back in just in January, a couple months ago, there was a big eruption, and it sort of had this eruption and then like little sort of stuff happening afterwards. But it's been quiet since March 7th. So
And
there
Lawrence,
are, yeah,
you've given us tons of these
no,
great
go ahead.
links too. I just want everybody to know, if you go to the
Yeah,
rvatlas.com and check out the show notes, you have links to so much of this stuff because it'd be pretty cool to watch these videos that you have linked here.
Yeah, and even if you just want inspiration, you can go and there are some live streams of some of this stuff, so you can kind of see what's happening, which is kind of fun just to check it out. And the volcanic activity ranges anything from just a little bit of steam coming up from the ground to little spurts of lava coming up to actual like eruptions that you need to get out of the way of.
All right. So, what else do we need to know about visiting? What other things to do? Like, how would you sort of structure your time there?
Yeah. So, like most trips to national parks, I always say the place to start is the visitor center. This is no different. And in fact, it's even more important because you got to get the up to the minute information about eruption conditions. So, start at the Kilauea Visitor Center, check out the exhibits, talk to a ranger, get the information about the latest. There's some movies you can watch. And then the way you're going to kind of orient your visit is along two main park roads. The first one that sort of priority one is the Crater Rim Drive, which is 10.6 miles long and circles the summit caldera. And I think you need at least 1 to 3 hours to see it, depending on how often you stop. You could theoretically do both of these drives in one day if you're really good at getting up early and getting a good start and making a full day. My family doesn't tend to be so efficient, and so I would probably want to spread the two drives out over the course of 2 days. But if you're a really efficient traveler, I think you could do both of these drives, which are the Crater Rim Drive and Chain of Craters Road in a day.
Are they white knuckle driving at all? Is it at all like nervous kind of
Um,
driving?
I don't remember it being, and the especially not Crater Rim Drive, Chain of Craters Road, um, maybe a little bit more so. Um, you can't. It used to be that the Chain of Craters Road took you all the way to the ocean, but a big part of the road got covered over with lava some years back. So now it's out and back, and it'll take you, down a ways, 19 miles, and then you have to turn around and go back. Um, but Crater Rim Drive, not so much. It's pretty accessible.
All right, great. And there's some cool things to do, obviously, along the way, right?
There Yes, there are a lot of very cool things, and you can get a road guide and all of that. But so it's going to take you on this one road that sort of circles the caldera through different landscapes, desert and rainforest, and lots of scenic stops and short walks that you're going to want to check out. One of the highlights definitely is the Thurston Lava Tube, which is a 500-year-old lava tube. It's a half-mile loop trail through lush rainforest to get there. So it's an easy one. There's the Sulphur Banks, which is a paved trail and boardwalk where you can sort of see the volcanic gases coming up from the ground. Um, and the Kilauea Overlook and picnic area are over there. Um, there is the Uekahuna Overlook of the Halema Uma U crater. That's has a 10-minute walk to the rim of the steaming crater, which is the heart of the volcano and also a sacred Hawaiian cultural site. So that's something you're definitely going to want to see. Um, then there's the Kilauea Iki crater overlook, which is a really dramatic view of the crater. And it's also the start of probably the most popular hike in the park, which is the Kilauea Iki Trail. So if you are up for a hike, this is probably the main, hike that I would recommend. It's a 3.3-mile loop trail when you depart. Excuse me, when you depart from the crater overlook, and it's through. Sort of takes you through rainforest into the crater across frozen lava lake that's still steaming. It's all very dramatic stuff. Really cool, otherworldly landscape. It does have 400 feet of elevation loss first and then gain. Um,
I
so
see the
that's a
wisdom in
great place to
doing
start if you're
I
looking for
see the
one
wisdom
hike.
in doing the 2 drives in 2 days. I mean, because I would wanna
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
the 3.3-mile hike, and then all of a sudden, I'm not gonna do the other drive as
Right.
well, so I'm thinking most people might wanna do it
Exactly.
that
And
way.
I think that's right, and you're gonna wanna stop at one of the picnic overlooks for a picnic lunch and, take your time in the visitor center, so that if you have the time, that's the way that I would wanna do it. Yeah.
Okay, so what about the Chain of
So
Craters
those are
Road?
some of the sites. Yeah. So Chain of Craters Road, this is exceptionally scenic, especially when the weather is clear. If it's really fogged in, then you're not going to have the same degree of dramatic views. But it takes you from the crater down to sea level. Like I said, it's you can't get all the way to the coast because the road disappears under frozen lava before reaching the ocean now. But there are just tons and tons of scenic stops. But plan to spend at least 3 hours round trip on the road, and I think that's maybe an underestimate. If you want to, do some hikes and do some exploring and stop for a picnic. The Pu'uloa petroglyphs are a highlight, reached via a 1.5-mile round trip trail. Another good hike is the Pu'u Hulu Hulu cinder cone over the 1973-74 lava flows, starting at the Mana Ulu parking lot, and that one is 2.6 miles round trip. There are also, audio guides and road guides that you can get that list all of the many stops on that beautiful drive. So if you have the time to do that one as well, it's definitely worth it.
In a weird way, it's reminding me of Yellowstone. Like, you could do a driving tour and not bring the hiking boots, or you could really go out and do some hiking and get really outdoorsy and kind of build up a good sweat and kind of make of it what you want, right? I could see how a wide variety of types of traveler will really love these drives.
Yeah, I think that's right. And if hiking is beyond you, then sort of ask the rangers because there definitely are some things that are more accessible via flat paved roads and boardwalks. So you're going to want to make sure that you have time to do those things. Or if getting out off the beaten path is your jam, then maybe you're going to want to do some longer or more ambitious hikes than these, and they'll be able to tell you what's best to see at the time based on what the volcanic activity is like that day.
And how did your little VW Westphalia do? I hope it didn't break down on one of these drives.
No, it didn't. We did great. We had a great time and, we're able to sort of fix our lunch from the inside of the van and experience all of that. And, if you've never gotten to travel in a VW camper van, there's something that just definitely makes you feel like you're, you know, uh, in that life, in that vibe, and it kind of helps you feel that sense of adventure and like you're up for anything. So,
I remember when
so it was
Stephanie and I
great.
were dating her, like, talking about wanting a Westie. It's sort of been this,
Yeah.
lifelong thing. I'm gonna have to check in with her and see if that's, like, still a dream of hers. Alright, we're gonna come back in a
Yeah,
second, and we're gonna talk about some other NPS sites, and it's not an episode with Lauren Eber if we don't get some food and drink recommendations. She
of
did this with
course.
all of her, trilogy, last year. But before we come back and wrap up the show with Lauren Eber from A Fan with a Van, we have a sponsored message from our friends at Go RVing. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are here with Lauren Eber from A Fam with a Van, and she has taken us on an epic journey around the Big Island, and we're not done yet. So you just want to remind everybody that there's a couple other NPS sites, not just Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, and then you want to give some food and drink recommendations as you always do.
Yeah. So I mentioned already that when you're in Kona is a great place to sort of check these out. They're very convenient. And it's the Pu'uhonua o Honauhau National Historical Park, which is a sacred site to the historic people. And then also the Kaloko Hono Kohau National Historical Park. And you can do both of those together in one sort of trip, and check out the cultural, spiritual, and then also just natural beauty of those sites, and stop by the visitor centers and get a couple more stamps in your passport.
All right, now I think it's fair to call you a foodie. I think that that would be an accurate. description. And by the way,
Okay.
Lauren Eber from A Fan with a Van is gonna be on the Bon Appetit podcast. What is the
Oh.
name of what is the name of that
Dinner
podcast?
SOS.
Did
Dinner
oh,
SOS.
everyone
Yeah.
listening to the RV Atlas, check out Dinner SOS. She's on that too. I could stop here and talk for 20 minutes about that, but we'll stay focused. So give us like so we're vacationing on the Big Island. Give us just some cool things we need to check out for food and drink if that's a big part of our travel experience.
Absolutely. So, while you're here, it's just the fresh produce is so incredible. And so you want to hit places that are taking advantage of that. And I know I mentioned it already, but it bears repeating. Please don't spend time on the Big Island without at least once checking out a farmer's market. And there are also roadside stands where you can get a coconut opened up for you, and so take advantage of those little stops. Find a guy on the side of the road selling fruit or whatever, and it's worth stopping and sampling the incredibly fresh, wonderful, delicious local produce. I had never tasted a pineapple until I had the pineapple that I had at the farmer's market in Hawaii.
Oh
It's
my
like
god,
a
that sounds
different
so good
experience. So
right
go for
now.
that.
It's also
Yeah.
getting a taste of the culture
And you can
too.
find yes, 100%, because a lot of the farmers markets also are gonna have some local crafts. You're gonna have an opportunity to talk to locals. So d I it's a great, culinary and cultural experience, and there are some guides where you can look up the timetables and try to find one that's gonna be open while you're there. Um, if you're looking for, like, a true restaurant, I really recommend Merriman's, restaurant, in Waimea. There are a few Merriman's restaurants on different Hawaiian islands. So, for people who've been to other islands, it's possible you may have been to one of these before. The Merriman's Waimea is the original and sort of flagship restaurant of Chef Peter Merriman. This is farm to table Hawaiian regional cuisine. It's delicious food in a homey setting. Um, it books up, so reservations are strongly recommended. And in fact, I would book a reservation before you even leave for Hawaii if you can. And just a really, really wonderful, memorable meal.
Alright, great, and then some
And
other, like,
then
tours and tastings?
yes, again, so Kona is famous for coffee. You've probably heard of Kona coffee. So if you are a coffee drinker, you've got to sample the local coffee. So look up tours. I've included a website where you can see a list of different coffee plantations with plantation tours and tastings. We happened to fall in love. We were just eating somewhere and they served coffee that was so good. We asked at the restaurant what the coffee was, and it was from a place called Kona Blue Sky Coffee. And we fell in love with it so much that we actually started ordering it online, and that was our daily coffee for years. Um, and so maybe you'll get lucky and have that same kind of experience. Um, but that's definitely a really fun thing to see, and again, like a cultural thing as well. And then there's a brewery. We love breweries, going to local breweries wherever we are, and the Kona Brewing Company is a well-known local brewery in Kona with good food as well. It's a fun place to stop for a beer on tap and a meal. And then one other thing to mention is just shave ice. Shave ice is like a big thing in Hawaii and on the Big Island in particular. And there are people selling shave ice all over the place. So I don't have one particular shave ice spot to recommend, but do your own taste test and stop and get some local Hawaiian shave ice and enjoy that local experience as well.
Lauren, I know that we will have people listening that will plan a trip to the Big Island, and follow, part or all of your itinerary, and that's, one of the driving reasons I still love to do this podcast after all these years is just hearing that it inspires people to go on these types of epic trips. I have an odd question to end with here. Um, was the national park even the highlight of this trip for you? Like, in just terms of I mean, I know it sounded amazing, and it's like you're not gonna go to the Big Island and not go, but it just sounds like it might have not even been the best part of the trip for you.
That's a really good question. I mean, you know, We are national park people, and I imagine that a lot of your listeners are. And there are some of these national parks that are harder to check off your list because they do involve a flight or they're in more exotic places. And this is such a great one because I feel like it's a little bit less intimidating or more accessible than some of the other, I would say, island national parks. Um, so, it's funny because I feel like it was really more the whole experience that was, the highlight, and, um, I I don't think that I could pinpoint one particular thing that made the trip so worthwhile, and definitely the national park was a big part of the trip because seeing, seeing sort of the center point, this active volcano that's where everything else springs from, for me was really exciting, and I like that, the geological aspects of it. But you're right that, it was not like a lot of typical national park trips where the national park really is the main centerpiece, and then you have some other things around the edges, but it's all about the park. The park is maybe a big part of what got us there, and it kind of anchors the trip and definitely feels special, and it's exciting to get that Hawaii Volcanoes National Park visit off of your list. But it is true that it's more sort of the whole road trip experience and getting to see all of the different sides of this island that are kind of a result of this volcanic activity, interacting with the local Hawaiian people, tasting their food, and experiencing the culture. It was really sort of the whole road trip, all together that made it such a special and memorable trip for us.
Well, thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough for this great episode and for all the episodes over the years. Where can everybody follow along the fam with the van?
Yeah, we are on Instagram at a fam with a van, and just trying to keep those adventures going.
Yeah, and I'll link to like I'm now just kind of thinking like I'll link to some of the earlier episodes we did with you that were about your van actually about the van that you still have, right? And how you outfitted
Yep,
it. It's a
yep,
custom van, right? You didn't go and buy an RV van. You bought a Sprinter and you made it your own. So, Lauren Eber, thank you so
yep.
much for coming on the RV Atlas. Really, really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and I hope people get out to Hawaii.
Yeah, and like those of you listening who actually do this, and I know some of you will, it might be years from now, send me an email. Let me know. All right. Thank you, Lauren Eber.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the RV Atlas.
To find out more about the topics discussed on this show, head on over to thervatlas.com.
And to join the friendliest group of RVers, head on over to the RV Atlas group on Facebook and make sure to join us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at the RV Atlas.
If you enjoy our show, please consider leaving us a review over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
And we will see you at the campground.
See you at the campground.